specific feature of Mixpanel, which is group properties. So first of all, maybe just for those of you who are not that familiar with what groups are, you can see it basically as an extension of what the user profiles are in Mixpanel. So in Mixpanel, for each of the user, once you have identified them, it initialize their profile in the platform, and you can set different properties to those profiles. For some customers, it might be relevant to be able to group those users into a larger entity, such as a company. Imagine for a B2B company, an account, for instance, or a company for which there are different users that log in and perform actions. You would want to be able to group all those actions into a same profile, which is a profile of the company, and that's exactly what the group's properties and the group's profiles allow you to do. Basically, when you set a group for a user, it will initialize a profile for that group, and that profile you would be able to add different stuff, so different properties into there, as well as you would be able to have that overview of all the events of all the users that are assigned to that profile. So that's in a nutshell what groups are in Mixpanel. Now let's see in practice how you make that work. So first of all, if you go in the interface, if you go looking into your user panel, that is right here, you see that by default you can analyze everything using user. So that's the level of granularity that you can have by default in Mixpanel. Know that in order to have access to the group feature, so that's not a feature that's available by default. So first you need to have it available for your account, and if you don't have it, reach out to your account manager to have it activated. And once the feature is available in the account, you have to initialize it, to be able to use it effectively. To do so, you will go in the settings, project settings. In here, in the overview, if you scroll down a bit, you see a section that is called group keys, and that's basically where you need to initialize groups in your account. I think you can have up to 3 different groups at the same time. Very likely you can add extra, but you would have to reach out to your account manager for that. But by default you would have 3, and basically if I create one, you have 2 things. The first one is the group key, and the second one is the display name. So here, for instance, we will create the very simple one of company ID, which would be called the company, right? The group key, company ID here, is the equivalent for groups of the distinct ID for user. So that's a unique ID that is used to identify a specific company. We'll see that in practice right after. So I save it, I create it here, save. So I see now that I have company ID, which is the company. So now if I come back here in my user tabs, normally, and it can take a few minutes to, okay, it's right there. You see that I have a second option now, which is company. And if I click on it, I will have access to a new list here. It's not refreshed yet. It's still my users that I have here. Come on. It's just the interface being slow to reload. I'm just reloading the page. So basically, voilà, I have 0 company with profile. So I see that now I'm not at the user level anymore, but I'm at a company level. So that's here that we'll be able to access my company profile. How to create a company profile? Different ways to do it. The code way, so basically calling specific methods in the code to initialize a company profile in here and assign a user to it. The second way is directly here in the menu using the Add Edit Profile button in here, for which you see that you can create profile or import from a CSV. So if you have an existing list, for instance, of companies, you would use that feature to initialize their profiles already, so that you don't have to create it from scratch in your code when people log in for the first time for those companies and so on. you can already do kind of an historical import of the companies that you have already and import them using a CSV. You can also add them manually using the create profile feature. You see that here you have two options: adding a user, which is not what we want now. It would be adding an individual user in the user tab, which is not what you want. Here we would want to add a company. So for instance, here I would have the company 001 that I would call human 37A, because I will create another one using the code to show you the difference. And I will add the profile. You see that it can take a bit of time to be there. So the initialization is in process. It can take a few minutes. In the meantime, we will already go in the code and show you how to do it via code. So basically what I will do here is I will simulate I'm a new user arriving on the platform and creating an account or logging into my account, right? So we should just do a mixpanel.track event 1, let's say, right? Then I will log in. For that, mixpanel.identify. If you have any doubts about the methods I'm using right now, there should be other videos from Glenn already covering the topic. Feel free to refer to those to understand the basic of those. I won't go through that in this video. But so here I'm logging into an account for Cedric H37, doesn't matter. So what I did here is I just sent through one event. I logged in into, I simulated that I logged in into an account, so I identified. Now I'm an identified user, which it did already is in the interface. Normally, if I go into my events, in here, I have the event 1, I have an identified, and if I go on the profile of my user here, you see that I have two IDs, my unused IDs, my identified IDs. So the identified worked properly, which what it did also is it made available for me to log in user properties. So you can log user properties in a profile only after an identify method has been called. So as of now, I can create user properties, which I won't do here because that's not the point of this video, but it has its importance because the next method that I will show you is how to assign a user to a company, basically. Two possibilities here again. Either the company you want to assign a user to is already initialized in Mixpanel. So that's the case, for instance, for the company I added manually right before, so the human 37 one, which is now initialized, so I could use it directly. If the company is not existing yet, you have to initialize it first. So to initialize it, you would use a specific method, which is the mixpanel.set group, then the name of the key. So here is the company ID. Remember the key that I've put in the settings to create the feature, basically in the account. And then the actual distinct ID, I would say, of that company, which would be company 002, because I already created the 001, which was the human 37 one. So I create that one. I could also, if I wanted, add properties to that using the, like just adding brackets and setting properties directly here. I won't do it right now because I will show you right after the method to do that. So doing that, what does it do? It does three things. It first initializes the company in the Mixpanel account, so in the company tab. It will create a company called company with the ID company 002. It will assign that user, so the current user, which is my Cedric H371, it will assign him to the company. When I say assign him, it means that the company will be logged into that user profile. So when we will go see the user profile here, which I will do like right now, if I go see my user profile right here, if I look in my properties now, you see that I have a company ID, which is my company 002. See that it's an array. It's because we can add multiple companies to a user if we want to. But so it means that that company is logged on that user profile, so that user is tied to the company. And it also does the same as Mixpanel.register would do, which is creating a super property. So it means that all the events that I will send as of now, on top of being logged into my user profile, it will also be logged in the company profile. So now if I do mixpanel.track event2, right? It will send the event to my user profile, but it will also send it to the company profile. Before checking that, or actually I can checking that right now, just hoping that the company profile has been initialized yet, because it can take quite some time. So what I can just check in here, in my event, if you look at the properties, you see that company 002 is automatically set as a property in the event. While if you look at the code that I wrote to do so, I didn't specify it. So it works exactly the same as a super property would do in here. So it's logged into the profile of that user. Normally, it should also be logged in into the company profile. So that's what we will check going in my user tab, changing my graduality, going to company, right? And I see here that I have human37A, which is the one that I created manually before. You see that the other one is not there yet. It's because it takes time to appear. So it will be there in a few minutes, but we won't wait for that to happen. So what I will do is I basically redo what I just showed you, but in the case of an existing company. So this one, human37A, which is right here. I will redo the exercise so that you can have it. What I maybe Mixpanel so an extra method that we want to use is to assign a property to a company profile. For that, you would use the Mixpanel.get group. There, it's my company ID. It's company 002 dot set, and there I would set name being human37 to a B, for instance. Okay, yeah. Up. So what I did here is I added the name in the company, and that might be actually why it doesn't show up yet in the profile. We'll see right now if I go back in my users, go to the company view. Okay, so you see that's undefined. It's because it takes some time to update once again, but that's my profile. No, see that's now it's called correctly, so it just takes some time for the profile, even more than for user profiles. It takes more time for group properties to be synced correctly in the interface, but it's there. So what we see here, I have my company 002, which is the one I created using the code. If I look at the properties, I know of the name human37B, which is the properties I set using the mixpanel.getGroup.set, and then the properties that you want to set. And what you see as well is that the event that was sent to the profile of the user is also sent to the profile of the company, right? So that's basically how you create a group, assign a user to it, and then create properties for that group using the simplest method, so which is the mixpanel.setGroup. Know that there are other ways, as I said, to log events in a profile of a company. So if right now I just mimic that I'm a new user, so for that I do a mixpanel.reset. So I'm a new user. I just do an event. That event will be logged in my user profile. I will be an anonymous user. which means that if now I would do a mixpanel.setGroup, it wouldn't be logged in the profile of my user because my user cannot have a profile. I didn't do an identify. I won't do it now, but just so you know. So here, basically, if I just, for some reason, I wouldn't want to use the setGroup method, I could also directly specify within my events or using a super property, specify to which group I want to send those events as well, so that it shows up in the group tab. So for that, very simple, I would do same mixpanel.track. I would just add properties, and the property I would add here is the company ID. And it will be company 002. And I will call it event in a property. If I send that, and I go here, if I go back in my events view, right, I see that I'm a new user, it's a new color. If I check in the profile here, of course, I don't have the company set as a profile property because I cannot have a profile property, I'm not identified. But if I look in the properties of my event, I have my company ID, which is company 002. Which means that if I go in my company profile, in here, see that it's still showing undefined despite the fact that it's human37b, doesn't matter. My events that I logged just using the regular property shows up in here as well. So that's another way that you can send event to a group profile. So voilà, basically that should allow you to use the group features properly. You know how to create a group, assign it to your user, and then send event to that group, as well as setting properties in that group profile. So you're pretty much set to start using the feature.